The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, a number I recognized but hadn't seen in 6 months. It was Valerie, my daughter-in-law, her voice a sweet, precise melody she reserved for when she wanted something. "Owen misses you, Dad," she cooed. "I think it's time we brought this family back together." I gripped the phone, watching the November rain streak down my Connecticut kitchen window. 6 months. That's how long it had been since Owen and I last spoke. A cold silence that began with an argument I still couldn't quite explain. Something about money, about control, about the way Valerie seemed to steer every conversation, every decision, every part of Owen's life that used to include me. "He wants me there?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Owen was too proud to reach out first. "He does," Valerie said smoothly. "This Saturday, dinner at our place, 7 o'clock. I'm making that pot roast you taught me." She'd never made pot roast in her life. I'd taught Anne that recipe 30 years ago, when our kitchen was full of laughter instead of silence. But I didn't correct her. Prosecutors learn to listen for what people don't say as much as what they do. "I don't know, Valerie. Maybe it's too soon." "Simon," her voice dropped, losing some of that sugar-coated warmth. "Owen is your only son. Anne would have wanted you two to work this out." "You know she would." The mention of Anne hit exactly where she intended. My wife had died 6 years ago, and she'd spent her final months worrying about the growing distance between Owen and me. I'd promised her I'd fix it. I just hadn't figured out how. I looked back at Owen's graduation photo. 24 years old in that picture, grinning in his cap and gown, his arm around my shoulders. That version of my son still existed somewhere beneath the expensive suits and the defensive walls he'd built, didn't he? "Okay," I heard myself say. "Saturday, 7 o'clock. "Wonderful." The warmth returned to Valerie's voice, like someone had flipped a switch. "We're so looking forward to it, Simon. It'll be just like old times." But as I hung up, my prosecutor's instinct, the one that never fully retires, whispered a warning I couldn't quite name. Old times. We'd never had old times with Valerie. She and Owen had been married 7 years, and I could count on one hand the number of real conversations we'd had. She was always pleasant, always appropriate, but something about her reminded me of the witnesses I used to prep for trial, people who'd rehearsed their lines so many times they forgot what the truth looked like. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Anne and I used to plan our days, where Owen used to do his homework, where our family used to feel like something solid and real. Now it was just me and the silence, and a phone call that felt less like an olive branch and more like an opening move in a game I didn't understand. 4 days. I had 4 days until Saturday. 4 days before I walked into that house and discovered something that would force me to choose between my son's freedom and the truth. I spent those 4 days doing what retired prosecutors do. I couldn't stop myself from investigating. Wednesday morning, I woke before dawn, a habit built over 30 years of court schedules that retirement hadn't managed to break. I told myself I wasn't investigating. I was just observing. The November air bit cold as I walked through my neighborhood, watching the last stubborn leaves cling to the oak trees lining my street. Connecticut autumns had always been Anne's favorite season. She used to say the falling leaves reminded her that endings could be beautiful. I'd never told her that prosecutors don't see endings that way. We see what comes after. The cleanup, the consequences, the truth that surfaces when everything else falls away. By 8 o'clock, I was at Roosevelt's Cafe, the place where I'd been drinking my morning coffee for the past 15 years. The owner, Patricia, who'd stopped asking why I always sat at the corner table facing the door, brought me my usual black coffee, no sugar, without a word. That's where Malcolm Reeves found me on Thursday morning, staring at my phone like it might reveal something I'd missed in Valerie's voice 2 days earlier. "You look troubled, Simon." Malcolm slid into the seat across from me, setting down his own coffee. At 62, he'd been a detective for 25 years before starting his private investigation business. We'd worked dozens of cases together back when I was still prosecuting. Now, we just played chess on Wednesday afternoons and pretended we weren't both still looking for patterns in everything around us. "First contact in 6 months, I said, showing him my call history. "My daughter-in-law, Dinner invitation for Saturday. Malcolm studied me the way he used to study crime scenes. Methodical, patient, missing nothing. And you don't trust it. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He took a sip of his coffee. Trust your instincts, Simon. You taught me that. But that was the problem. My instincts weren't giving me clear answers. They were just whispering warnings I couldn't translate into evidence. Thursday afternoon, I did something I'm not proud of. I drove past Owen's house. I told myself I was just taking a different route to the grocery store, but the truth was simpler and sadder. I wanted to see where my son lived now, what his life looked like without me in it. The address led me to Greenwich, one of those Connecticut neighborhoods where old money meets new ambition. Owen's house sat on a corner lot, a sprawling colonial that would have made Anne gasp. I slowed down just enough to take it in. Professional landscaping, a new BMW in the circular driveway, and what looked like major renovation work on the back deck. Through my prosecutor's eyes, I saw dollar signs everywhere. That house would cost at least $1.2 million. Easy. I knew what Owen made, or at least what he used to tell me he made. Corporate lawyers at mid-level firms in Connecticut pulled in a good salary, but not that good. Not enough for this. Not for a house like this. And the car. And the renovations. A chill ran down my spine. A cold premonition that had nothing to do with the November air. Something was profoundly wrong. Saturday evening. The air was crisp, the sky a deep indigo, as I pulled into Owen's circular driveway. The house glowed, every window radiating warmth. A stark contrast to the unease churning in my stomach. Valerie met me at the door, radiant in a silk dress, her smile wide and seemingly genuine. "Simon, so glad you could make it." She kissed my cheek, a gesture that felt more performative than affectionate. Owen appeared behind her, looking thinner than I remembered. His eyes shadowed, his smile tight. "Dad," he said, his voice flat. "Good to see you." The dinner was a carefully orchestrated performance. Valerie dominated the conversation, recounting Owen's recent successes at work, their plans for a vacation to the Maldives, the exquisite new art they'd acquired. Owen barely spoke, offering only monosyllabic answers when directly addressed, his gaze darting nervously between Valerie and me. He avoided my eyes, his hands trembled, and every answer sounded rehearsed. I had been suspicious for weeks about his money, his fear, his silence. The pot roast, ostensibly Valerie's creation, was bland, overcooked, and tasted nothing like Anne's recipe. I pushed the food around my plate, my prosecutor's mind cataloging every detail, every discrepancy. Then, a wave of dizziness hit me, sudden and disorienting. My head swam, the room tilting precariously. "Excuse me," I mumbled. "I just need some water." I stood, steadying myself on the back of a chair, and headed for the kitchen. But instead of going for water, I followed my instincts, the whispers of warning that had been growing louder since Valerie's call. I slipped away, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet, and found myself in Owen's home office. The door was ajar. Inside, the room was immaculate, almost sterile, unlike the chaotic, book-strewn space Owen used to keep. My gaze fell on his desk. What I saw there stopped my breath. A small, unlabeled vial, a syringe, and a half-empty bottle of a powerful sedative. My blood ran cold. My son was being drugged, and Valerie was behind it. I picked up my phone, my hand trembling, and called 911. My voice, usually steady, was a raw whisper. "I need an ambulance. And the police. My son is in danger." The next few hours were a blur of flashing lights, urgent voices, and the sickening realization of the depth of Valerie's deception. Owen was rushed to the hospital, and the police began their investigation. I explained everything: the strange call, the staged dinner, the drugs in his office. They found more evidence: a hidden camera in Owen's bedroom, financial documents showing large sums of money being siphoned from his accounts, and a forged power of attorney. Valerie, calm and collected to the last, denied everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. She was arrested. The hospital room was quiet, sterile. Owen lay pale and still, an IV drip in his arm. Malcolm arrived, his face grim. "Security footage," he said, pulling up something on his tablet. The jail finally sent it over. Watch this. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Two men entering the parking garage at 3:50 p.m., 40 minutes before I'd arrived, moving with purpose toward level 3, taking positions behind the support pillars. Then other people, a woman with 2 children leaving, an elderly man, a young couple. The attackers let them all pass, staying hidden, waiting. Then me at 4:30, walking from the elevator toward my car. The attackers moving, the brief struggle, me falling. Then they were gone, out the stairwell, disappearing into the city. The whole thing lasted less than 90 seconds. They were waiting for you, Malcolm said quietly, his detective's face set in hard lines. This wasn't random. I shifted in the hospital bed, my ribs screaming in protest. She knows. Malcolm didn't need to ask who I meant. She, Valerie, knows you're investigating her, and she just sent you a very clear message. Back off, or next time will be worse. Day 2 in the hospital. Thursday morning, I woke to find Malcolm sitting in the chair beside my bed. Laptop open, his face wearing an expression I'd learned to recognize over years of working together. He'd found something, and it was bad. I ran a deep background check on Valerie Thompson, Malcolm said, turning the laptop so I could see the screen. The kind that goes beyond what's publicly available. And Valerie Thompson didn't exist before 7 years ago. I blinked, trying to process that through the fog of medication and pain. What do you mean she didn't exist? I mean her birth certificate, her social security number, her employment history, everything that makes a person legally real. Either it's all fake, or it's tied to someone else entirely. She's a ghost, Simon. A phantom. He paused, letting that sink in. Her real name is Kendra Hayes. Kendra Hayes. The name struck me like a physical blow. Kendra, the daughter of Robert Hayes, a man I had prosecuted for embezzlement 15 years ago. A man who had taken his own life in prison, leaving behind a grieving wife and a young daughter. I remembered the case vividly. The public outcry, the media circus. I had believed I was doing justice. Now, the past had returned. A vengeful ghost. She blames you, Malcolm continued, his voice low, for her father's death, for her family's ruin. She's been planning this for years. Owen was just a means to an end, a way to get to you. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. The calculated charm, the subtle manipulation, the way she had isolated Owen from me. It was all part of a meticulously planned revenge. Owen's recovery was slow, painful. The sedatives had taken a toll, leaving him with memory gaps, weakness, and a profound sense of betrayal. February brought physical and cognitive therapy. Gradually, the son I remembered returned, clearer but scarred. In March, he moved into an apartment near my house. Weekly dinners began, awkward at first, then easier. April, the divorce was finalized, uncontested, signed from federal custody. May, Owen returned to work part-time, healthier, stronger, himself again. The day after Kendra's sentencing, Owen called. Dad, want to get coffee? We met at Roosevelt's cafe. Sunlight filled the room. Owen looked present, alive. The doctors say the effects should fade completely, he said. Some memory gaps may remain, but most of it's coming back. You're here, I said. That's what matters. After a pause, Owen spoke. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. She kept me so confused. You were manipulated and drugged. That wasn't your fault. He nodded. Do you ever think about visiting her? I already did. He looked surprised. The prison visiting room was divided by plexiglass. Kendra sat in an orange jumpsuit, older, hollow. Why did you come? She asked. To say I'm sorry about your father and your grandmother. The system failed your family. You didn't prosecute him. No, but I'm still sorry for the child who grew up in grief instead of love. She was silent. Owen will never forgive me, she said. He doesn't have to. Then why forgive me? Because hatred destroys everything it touches. I won't carry it anymore. As I stood to leave, she pressed her hand to the glass. Thank you for saving Owen. Back at the cafe, Owen listened quietly. I don't know if I can forgive her, he said. You don't have to. Healing takes different paths. He smiled faintly. Mom would know what to say. She always did. Final scene. Sunday morning, September 2026. Owen and I drove to Riverside Cemetery together for the first time since Anne's funeral. We stood before her headstone. Anne Marie Brennan, 1960 to 2019. Beloved wife and mother. Mom would say we survived, Owen said. That we're still family. Still family, I repeated. His hand rested on my shoulder. No fear, no flinch. Next Sunday, he asked, coffee? I'd like that. Driving home in warm sunlight, I reflected on everything I'd learned about truth, about hatred passed down, about forgiveness earned slowly, about how love, imperfect but real, is stronger than revenge. Some things just take time, and some things are worth waiting for. And to you listening to this story, remember this. I spent 30 years as a prosecutor believing that truth and justice were always clear-cut. But this family story taught me that sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones we never think to question. God has a way of revealing truth in the darkest moments, even when we've lost all hope. Standing in that Maryland farmhouse at dawn, watching 15 years of hatred crumble under the weight of documented evidence, I understood that divine timing isn't always comfortable, but it's always purposeful. Prayer kept me grounded when my son's life hung in the balance, and faith gave me the strength to forgive the unforgivable. If I could go back, here's what I'd tell my younger self. Don't let pride keep you from asking hard questions. Don't assume that because someone loves you, they can't deceive you. And never, ever let 6 months of silence with your child go unexamined. That revenge story Kendra orchestrated against me, it only worked because I wasn't paying attention. Because I thought being right mattered more than being present. This family story isn't just mine. It's a warning. To parents, stay connected to your children even when it's uncomfortable. To sons and daughters, communicate before resentment builds walls. To anyone seeking revenge, remember that Kendra spent 15 years destroying innocent lives, and it brought her nothing but a prison cell and a lifetime of regret. In my personal opinion, the real villain of this family story wasn't Kendra. It was unchecked grief, lazy journalism, and our collective failure to verify truth before passing judgment. We live in an age where anyone can be destroyed by a photograph taken out of context. That terrifies me. So please, if this story moved you, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you ever been caught in a web of misunderstanding? How did you find your way back to truth? Subscribe to this channel for more stories like this, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for staying with me until the very end.